Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the RDH Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Chad, joined alongside my brother Tanner. How's it hanging, dude?
You know, it's pretty good. I think we got a lot of good news in the sporting world recently. We got some gifts that have been given to Chad. If you're watching from the YouTubes, you can see he has a stand for his mic now, which has not always been the case. Him and I
No.
we're kind of twinning now. I know you open that up on Christmas and you're like, oh my god, this is amazing.
I mean, I like it. I like it how, I got the mic coming from the left, you got the mic coming from the right on my
That's true.
screen. It looks good aesthetically, and there has been some times where I've dropped my mic. If you listen to the podcast for the last couple of years, I've done it a couple times. But yeah, new year, new mic, not new me. You know what I mean? Same old me, right? Same old podcast, RDH Sports. We talk a ton of football. And today we're talking college football, we're talking playoff football, and week 18 football because we've missed so much. So we're going to jump right into it right now. But right before we do, just want to say to all the listeners this year, thank you.
Yes.
Everyone that's followed the socials, thank you. We never thought we would ever get over 30,000 views on a reel, and we've done it a couple times now. So thank you to everybody again, and time to get into the college football talk. And
Oh
hey,
yeah.
let's do it again this year, and we're gonna make it even better as we keep going. I got a new mic, and hey, maybe a new computer soon. Can't really get a new face. Kind of stuck with that one. College football talk. Let's go. Alabama versus Michigan. If you weren't watching the games this past weekend, whoa, that's all I got to say. That game was such a good game. It was such a good game. Alabama came up short at the end. McCarthy gets player of the game with 3 touchdowns. Blake Corum, the running back for Michigan, breaks the school record for rushing touchdowns in overtime, and it ends up being the winning touchdown. And then Alabama defense just couldn't stop Michigan
hmm
at all.
hmm
And the offense completely stalled. But main thing I want to say about this game, it is a recap. We're recording on Thursday, usually record on Tuesday, so you're getting a little bit late. So that's why we're kind of running through these a little bit quicker than we usually do. But I thought Alabama had them. And they just JJ McCarthy, just progression year over year. We talk about it every episode. I mean, how good is this football player?
I think he's really good. I mean, you saw him last year, and you thought Michigan was like they were a good team last year, but they went out and I wouldn't say JJ McCarthy had the best performance towards the end of last year, but this year he stepped it up. He absolutely was the player of the game, and I don't think anyone could have doubted that. Like Blake Corum, he had a good game. Don't get me wrong. He was wide open a lot too, especially in the passing game too. But like it's McCarthy who's making those reads. He's putting the receivers in great positions, right? He's throwing these balls into tough coverage. Like, I mean, this is an Alabama secondary that is good. Like, it's not a bad secondary ad. It's very, very good. It's better than it has been in recent years. And just the explosiveness of Alabama on offense and on defense is hard to limit. You know what I mean? So it's just really impressive what he did, and it's just kind of going back to like what we've been saying this whole year. Michigan's that football team this year. They just are. It's that they look really good. They look unbeatable. This is the closest game that they've played since Ohio State this season. So I think it's well deserved. I really do, and I'm excited to see what they're gonna do in the championship game.
It's going to be a good one. And it's Michigan. Michigan hasn't been there in a very long time, national championship wise.
hmm
First time winning a college football playoff game, if I'm not mistaken. And we pretty much said it. JJ McCarthy won the game, and Blake Corum came in at crunch time and really delivered when he needed to. I'm really interested to see where Blake Corum goes in the draft, because a lot of folks last year thought that he was going to declare, but no, he came back, and this is the reason he came back. So it's going to be pretty hard to beat whoever they're playing in the championship, which perfect segue. We'll bring it to next time, because I don't think I've ever seen a more determined football team than Washington. You heard the announcers or the analysts on the game talking about what Washington did. Michael Penix Jr. and Washington's coach was coming into the meeting. Penix Jr. told all of the coaching staff to leave. All of the coaching staff left. It was a players only meeting for 20 to 30 minutes. Coaches had no idea what was said. And then Penix comes out there and throws 430 yards and 2 touchdowns. I mean, I get it. that Texas isn't supposed to have that good of a defense. But I mean, I went to A&M. I'm not technically allowed to root for Texas, but you always like to see the Texas teams in there. Same with the California teams. You know what I mean? Those are the two states I like to see when they're in there. But Texas just, I mean, defensively didn't do a whole lot,
Mhm.
unless Washington ran the ball up the middle with their nose tackle, and that was about it. Texas just really did not look good defensively, and I did not expect Michael Penix Jr. to have that big of a field day. And also on the other side of the coin, I didn't expect Quinn Ewers to look that bad. He looked off. And if you watch the whole game, the stats at the end, he
Mhm.
had over 230 passing yards. That looks a lot better than what he had because that pretty much three quarters. I mean, Quinn did not look himself, in my
Mhm.
opinion. And Washington is a solid defense, but at the same time, I think Texas beat Alabama, right? And when you have Texas playing that team, winning like that, I mean, you would just expect them to hit. You know what I mean? And they just
Mhm.
didn't. Texas really didn't show up. The score I thought was a lot closer than it needed to be as well. But hey, Washington's moving on, and Texas now has a year to build off of.
Yeah, I really think, even though Texas had like a really good shot to win it at the end, I think the better football team at the end of the day won. It's just hard to beat a quarterback like that, like the brilliance of Michael Penix. You're seeing it right now. He's on another level. I really I think this year, besides Jaden Daniels, right, like he's the number two, right, in terms of players, just overall players. Um, and he's showing it. It's hard to do that. I wouldn't say the Texas defense wasn't like insanely bad. There were some good coverage plays, but I mean, Penix is just putting the ball in the perfect place. I mean, how many times did you just see him launch the ball downfield? He just takes a shot and boom, it's like right here. It's in the receiver's like bread box. He all he's got to do is reach out his hands, boom, bring it in. That's a catch. Um, Granted, they had a step or two on the DB, but like you see NFL quarterbacks miss that throw all the time. I watch the New Orleans Saints sometime, and Derek Carr is just like, like, but it's really impressive what he's doing right now, and I think you got to give a lot of credit to Washington. I think it's going to be a fun championship because these teams have had some winning droughts. Both of these teams, Washington and Michigan. I don't remember the last time Michigan won it, but I think Washington the last time they won it was in like the 90s or something like that. But it's going to be really cool because you're going to have a champion who's not Alabama, who's not Georgia, so it's no SEC schools either. Like it's Washington. Like Washington's in the championship. Like that's so cool. I don't know. I think
Yeah, I mean,
I
and they deserved it. They
they
deserved
do.
it, right?
They do.
They
And
played. They beat Oregon this year.
the thing is
Twice.
they've been in these battles over and over and over this year. Like they're playing tough competition. Like we saw them play USC, like we saw them play Oregon, like you were saying. Like they're playing the best of the best teams. Like we've been saying the Pac-12 is a really, really good conference this year, and they're in the championship. And they deserve to be it. Washington won won the conference game, the conference championship, and it looks like they're going on. Like I don't know. It's hard to say. What if Michael Penix goes out there in a national championship game? What if he puts up 5 touchdowns, 500 yards? He just absolutely destroys Michigan. What does that do to his draft stock? I know you're a big Caleb Williams guy, but I'm trying to test your limits here, Chad. Like where does it go? Does a team, quote unquote, reach on him for the number one overall pick? If you're, I think the Bears that are locked into it now instead of a Caleb Williams.
I mean, I think you have a ton of different angles
Yeah.
there. First of all, I'm going to hit on your point that Penix, was hitting everywhere. He was throwing over shoulder passes 50 yards downfield that were on the money. You could throw a
Mm-hmm.
quarter up in the air and he'd hit the quarter out of the air. He was that accurate. Now, a name that none of us mentioned that I will mention is Rome Oduze. That kid is the number 2 wide receiver in the country, in my opinion. He is right behind Marvin Harrison Jr., and you saw why. He's our prospect spotlight today, so we're going to hit him here in a little bit.
Nice.
But he was also the big reason that Michael Penix was accurate. I mean, this kid doesn't only make catches, he makes fantastic catches. And he will be drafted, or he should be drafted number 2, the number 2 wide receiver off the board. There's no way anybody can take anyone before Marvin Harrison Jr. with just what you've seen this year. But if Marvin Harrison Jr. wasn't in college football this year, or wasn't eligible to go to the draft for some reason this year, Odunze would be the kid that is the number one wide receiver in the entire country. So that is the reason that, Penix is doing so well. Now, to answer your question about what happens if he goes out there and throws 500 yards and 5 touchdowns, I think he's going to be, the top 3 quarterbacks taken. If he has a performance like
Top
that, I already
three.
think he's kind of. Oh yeah,
Not even top
I
two.
kind of think.
You don't think
No,
top two is a lock?
here's my reasoning with top 2. If you go look back at him, Michael Penix Jr. specifically, he was at Indiana for 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
He got injured every single year. He's never played a full season of college football up until this year. So personally, for me, if I'm an NFL GM, there's no shot I'm taking this kid number 1. Also, we all know I'm a Caleb Williams homer, and it's really hard to not put Michael Penix Jr. above Jaden Daniels, like you said, the LSU quarterback. So
it's fair. I agree.
To me, those are the 3 quarterbacks. Now, if you go to Pro Day and you go to the NFL Combine and, Caleb Williams tests horrendously, then maybe you could have the conversation of one of these guys jumping in. But here's the thing. You nailed it. I'm a big draft guy. I'm a huge draft guy. And if you listen to the show, especially in the offseason, that's what you're listening for. Because, I'm going to go through about 150 prospects, if not more. And there's a lot of rumors that come about in draft season because it's a lull and there's no football. And it's just like, I just feel like it's media trying to make rumors. All 3 of these quarterbacks' names are going to be interchangeable to number 3 at some point. Okay. I'm saying that now. It happens every single year. Also throw Bo Nix in. If Bo Nix has a good pro day, they're going to go in there and talk about him as number 1 as well.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I'm an NFL GM, which obviously I'm not, I'm a couch warrior, but I watch way more football than the average person. Same with you. That's why we do the podcast together. I'm basing off of how high his ceiling is and where I project him to be. Michael Penix, to me, has a pretty high ceiling when you see a game like he played against Texas, right? Now, when you go back and you look at the games against Indiana, some of those games, that does not look like the same quarterback. I'm just going to say that right now. Jaden Daniels, another transfer kid. Another kid, if you go look at his freshman, sophomore tape, it doesn't really look the same than what he does now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Caleb Williams is the only one that's looked better and better every single year. And I'm not saying these guys haven't, but I'm just saying for me personally, his ceiling and his floor are pretty damn close. And that is scary. Now, I also said that about Trevor Lawrence. And right now, you could say that, I had Trevor Lawrence pegged way too high in terms of prospects. I had him up there with Andrew Luck, right? So quarterbacks are the hardest position to evaluate, and that's why you have so many quarterbacks going in the first round, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we'll get into another question because I actually wanted to ask you a question.
Okay.
Arch Manning is
go.
just sitting there waiting, licking his chops. SEC football next season. Quinn's a sophomore. So Quinn's going to come back. What the hell happens?
It's really hard because I think you looked at this season and it's Quinn's job. It's his football team. He took him to the college football
100%.
playoffs. It's his team. You can't just go ahead and bench him for a big name, young kid. I get it. It's Arch Manning. He has a lot of talent. He's got a lot of really, really good quarterbacks in his backfield, coaching him up. But I think it's Quinn's team for right now and into the next season. Unless Arch Manning just shows you something absolutely insane in training camp, just Quinn is just not hitting. He's not looking like the same quarterback he was this past season in training camp, even into the season a little bit. I would maybe, at that time, maybe put Arch in, see what he can do. But I think it's Quinn's team. I think, he had a bad game in the playoffs. That's no one's debating that, but ultimately he gave his football team a chance to win. You know what I mean? In that game, they were in a position to win, a scoring position. Multiple times they could have gotten a touchdown. All they needed was a touchdown at the end of the game, and then a field goal, right? And the game would have been over. So I think it's his job. I really don't think Arch is going to play next year unless Quinn is just not the same player. If he's the same player, then why would you bench him? You know what I mean? Because he brought you to the number 4 seed, right? I think, or number 3 or whatever they were. Yeah, number 3. And they look good. They beat Alabama. You know, they were very, very competitive with Washington, who could potentially be the national championship. They took them to the very, very end of the game. So, in my mind, the only way Arch would surpass him is if he's like number 1 quarterback, Heisman potential, something like that. You know what I mean? Just his talent is just off the off the rocker, something like that. I don't know. I think
Yeah.
it's Quinn's job though.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with you there. It's hard to take away, the quarterback that has now 2 years of experience in this offense and now has, a number 3 seed and, like you said, a couple possessions away
Mm-hmm.
from going to the national championship, right? And the wins that he had this year are very impressive. And only 2 losses, right? That's it all season. Only 2 losses all season. So, last time Texas did that, they won the national championship with Vince Young. But we'll see what happened. But my biggest thing is if Arch doesn't, if Arch isn't guaranteed a starting spot next year, is he going to stay at UT? Is my thing, because now with the transfer rules, correct me if I'm wrong here, you can transfer and play. So
Mm-hmm. Well, he'll be a
I don't
sophomore
understand.
anyways, right? So at that point, he
Well,
can.
correct, and obviously he missed it already this season because the transfer deadline's already, like, he already missed it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm essentially answering my own question here, but I don't know, because I know when I've followed Arch Manning way more than a lot of Texas A&M fans probably have, because of his uncles, right? The Mannings, right? They're pretty decent. Some Super Bowl rings between the two of them. Um, and the thing in high school was that what they liked so much about Texas was they said he's not going to just be given a starting job. He has to earn it. And we have quarterbacks that already have a starting job and he has to beat them. He has to earn it. And the Mannings were like, no, that's exactly what we want. We don't want
Mm-hmm.
anything to be handed to him, right? Ultimately, Arch made the decision himself. But I mean, you already saw them start to pan in the game from Ewers when he was doing bad in the first half to Manning, Ewers to Manning, and it's like, oh, we're already starting that.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Now I get it. In the playoffs, you saw it with Tua and Jalen Hurts, but you knew that wasn't going to happen. You knew Quinn Ewers was more of a second half guy, and he was a bit, but like we said, he fell short. That's just going to be a headline that we're going to be talking about a lot next season, because Arch Manning, I would argue, is and could not is, because we haven't seen him play, could be a Heisman candidate,
He
could
could
be
be.
a Heisman winner. If he's a Manning, eh, he's had better coaching than Peyton and Eli, and he's
Mm-hmm.
had them next to him his whole life. He's been around football his entire life, and when you see kids like that, typically they're pretty successful. Now, it's
Marvin
gonna be really
Harrison
hard to
Jr.
be. Exactly. Nailed it. Right on the pen. And it's going to be real hard to be as successful as Peyton and Eli, whoever you want to put above the other. Personally, me, I'd put Peyton way above Eli, but it's going to be hard to be that successful, right? And you're at the same position. But
Mm-hmm.
when you watch this kid in high school, he's pretty solid. He's pretty solid. And he's obviously a 5-star prospect and one of the best prospects to come out of high school in most recent years. So he's already had a year in the system. Now it's almost his time to shine, in my opinion. I don't know if Texas is going to be like Alabama. I don't think you're necessarily going to have quarterbacks be able to sit 2 years and then just show up and go 1 year like they did with their running backs. You remember that? They would have all these running backs, Mark Ingram, Derrick Henry,
Yeah,
all these guys,
they just push him
and
out year after year.
they would sit there for 2 years
Mm-hmm.
before they got to play consistently. So I don't know if that's necessarily going to happen, because I think Quinn Ewers will absolutely declare next year to go to the NFL draft. But that's a headline that I wanted to put in our fans' ears, because that's a big one.
I mean, if you would compare Texas program to Alabama's, right? If they're continuing to be good, if they're continuing to be extremely competitive next year in the SEC, I think I think Arch Manning absolutely should stay, because you're going to get the recruits, you're going to get the national coverage, you're going to get everything like that, even if you're a backup. Like, remember back to the national championship when Tua came in for Jalen. He's not doing too hot first half. Tua comes in, wins the game. And it's just like, okay, that could happen with Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning. Like, it's not. I don't think it's outside of the realm of possibilities, because if you got two very, very good starting quarterbacks right there, it's a competition. It always will be a competition through the season. So I think he's going to get his chance. Um, granted it will whether it'll be in training camp or maybe in an actual game, but I would stay if I was Arch. I really would because there's not a lot of better opportunities out there. You know what I mean? Like it's Texas. It's one of the biggest programs in the nation. And if you let Texas succeed, if you lead them to another season like this one potentially in the future, I mean, come on, like you're you're getting drafted high, you're going to get considered for the Heisman. Like it's just all these things are just going to start happening. So I would stay at that very very historic program if I was him. Unless he could go to like another history, like Ohio State or something, like the bar is very, very high for him right now. Is all I'm trying to say.
Definitely. And now jumping to the next segment, prospect spotlight. We're going to hit Washington wide receiver Romeo Dunze. He's a junior. Like I said, I think he's early first round, uh, not wide receiver pick. I think this kid's going to be picked. I'd be very surprised if he's not picked in the top 10. I would also be shocked if he wasn't picked in the top 15. This kid has that kind of potential. I'm going to go ahead and read my report, what I got on him. He looks really big when he plays. Size jumps off the tape. Finds openings when running routes and becomes surprisingly wide open at times. You saw that in the Texas game. All he needs is this much space, and he's going to make that catch. Now, yes, he was going against some freshmen, some true freshmen, again Texas defensive backs, but still, he made those defensive backs at Texas, no disrespect, look like children. This kid is unbelievable at separation when the ball is right near him. And that's the best time you need to be at separation. One of the best players to do it in the NFL right now is Mike Evans. He doesn't push off, but it looks like he pushes off every single play right when the ball gets to him. This is what Odunze does. And that's something you cannot teach. That's something you just have to have. The past 2 seasons, he's had over 1,000 receiving yards and 100 targets each season. He is 6'3", 215 pounds. Opposing defensive backs have had trouble tackling this wide receiver. And when he goes up to get the ball in 50-50 situations, just consider it not really a 50-50 situation. He's going to come down with that ball. Now, there's going to be, some difference coming from the collegiate level to the NFL level. So I'm interested to see how his red zone production continues to improve in the NFL and or declines, right? And then he was one of the finalists for the best wide receiver in college football this year. There's only one wide receiver that was better than him, like I said earlier in the episode, and that's Marvin Harrison Jr. This is the lock number 2 wide receiver, in my opinion. If your team is looking for a wide receiver and they happen to pick after a team that needs one, meaning that Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be the first wide receiver taken, this is your guy. And here's my favorite stat, because I counted these games up myself. He had 10 100-yard receiving games. And that's not even this last game. So technically he's at 11 100-yard receiving games in his college career. That's scary. That's very scary that he has that many 100-yard receiving games, especially when you see how many targets he has. Right? When you have over 100 targets is a wide receiver, look out, because this kid's got a ton of production, and he's, I think, going to make it pretty easy to the next level. Now, first round wide receivers, that one was hard to say. They don't necessarily translate to the NFL that well, aside from, in most recent years, Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson and CeeDee Lamb, right? So it's going to be really interesting to see how high teams take him and how high teams value him compared to Marvin Harrison Jr. I want to see the drop off, and or if there is any on some teams' boards. So that's the prospect spotlight for this episode. That's all the college football we're talking about this episode. We're gonna match up preview the national championship about right before it comes out. So we'll get there. But now, NFL recent recap. Tanner, Browns update.
It's looking good in Cleveland. Let's just start off with that. I mean,
Believeland.
the Browns are in the playoffs for the first time since Baker led them to the playoffs. I think it was 2018 or no, it was 2021 or something like that. But they're in the playoffs. They got the 5 seed, and they're doing everything right. They're doing everything that they can. They're winning games, and they look like one of the best teams in the AFC right now. I really do think so. And they have a nice date with the number 4 seed, who is probably going to be Jacksonville or Houston. No offense, Indiana, or no offense, Indianapolis, but it's probably going to be one of those two teams who Cleveland has played both of those teams this year, and if it comes down to Indy, also that team, and they beat all three of them. The Texans without C.J. Stroud in there, but the thing is, they beat all three of them, and Joe Flacco looked good in all of them except Indy because he didn't play that game, and it's it's really nice. It looks really good. Like it's just this is a very, very good football team. Myles Garrett is probably one of the best defensive players in the NFL this year, if not the best. I think he's probably the front runner for DPOY. The defense is hitting on all cylinders. A bunch of their players made the Pro Bowl, and I think Joe Flacco is taking this team to places that they didn't think they could go. I really think you're seeing this system that Kevin Stefanski has, and it's just working to perfection. This entire season I've been talking about Browns need to run the ball, they need to lean on their running backs, and they do, and they're doing it well. They are mixing it in really, really well, but they're running this style, this system that's pass heavy. You got Joe Flacco coming in there throwing 40 times a game, and yeah, I mean he's going to turn over the ball, but he's also going to make a lot of big plays, and that's just what Joe Flacco is doing at this time in his life. And it's really impressive because your $250 million quarterback and Deshaun Watson wasn't doing that. Joe Flacco's throwing like 300 yards a game, 3 touchdowns a game, stuff like that. It's really impressive because he was sitting on the couch, like 5-6 weeks ago, and now he's going to take the Browns to the playoffs, and you never know what's going to happen. It's just one of those things. I saw a stat that was like the most road playoff wins of a quarterback in playoff history. Number 1 is Tom Brady, and guess who number 2 is?
The gunslinging Fu Manchu Joe Man Flacco.
Yeah, man, January Joe himself. So it's looking like a perfect storm. I think Cleveland is a really, really, really good team. And I think a lot of people are kind of sleeping on them. We'll see what happens with Joe in the playoffs. They're going to have, a week of rest this weekend, and they're going to hit the ground running. This team's scary. I don't think you want to play Cleveland. I think the two biggest teams in the AFC right now are Cleveland and Baltimore. And the Bills are looking very, very good. Miami's looking very, very good. The Chiefs are looking pretty okay, but they're winning games, stuff like that. But Cleveland is Believeland, baby. You got to Believeland. That's how I'll end my point.
I mean, they look good, right? Defensively, they look really good. You knew that was always the case, though, right? Their division alone in the AFC probably has like the best 3 defenses in the league every year consistently with
Usually,
Pittsburgh,
yeah.
Baltimore, and Cleveland, right? So, they're just so good defensively, and you nailed it on the head, Myles Garrett. Personally, if I was building a team, if I'm taking a defensive end first, it's him or TJ Watt, right? One of those two guys, you can interchange them. And Myles Garrett is front runner for Defensive Player of the Year right now, and I hope he gets it because Gigamax,
He's never
right?
won it, which is insane, dude. He's never won it.
It's because TJ Watt, you know
It
what I mean,
is. It is.
and it's also because his brother JJ, right? Like
It
like
is.
those guys recently have just been, and Aaron Donald, right? Like he's just
Yes.
unfortunately come in when Aaron Donald made a defensive category essentially of his own at the defensive tackle position. Like he looks little on the field, right? But then if you get close to him, he mauls like 350-pound men. And he picks you up by your throat almost. That man is like the most terrifying man in the NFL. Anyway, the Browns look good. And I think the Browns needed something, a spark offensively because they just
Hmm.
weren't getting it
Yeah.
with the inconsistent quarterback play. And they haven't gotten it with Deshaun yet. I don't know, what really happened with Deshaun Watson and what really happened with Russell Wilson because both of their play has just fallen off of a cliff. Russ has looked a little bit better. Deshaun, when he was in Cleveland this year and not hurt, I did see, he looked, some games looked pretty well. But I mean, if you're talking Russell Wilson and Deshaun of old, I mean, they were both elite top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL, in my opinion. And those were, those were some years ago, right? So you don't know what's going to happen with Deshaun when he comes back, but right now every Browns fan is riding Joe Flacco, and just like you said, I'm interested to see how he does in the playoffs. And we've talked about this so much, but I wonder really how much of a factor the fact that these safeties are so different, right? I mean, he was sitting on the couch. It's not like he's throwing against Ed Reed and Troy Polamalu anymore, but he is throwing against guys that are running like 4.4s. so
No, yeah.
so you could.
I
You can
mean,
pick and choose.
just look at this past week, like the Jets game. That's a very, very good defense. They have a stout defensive line. Their corners are disgusting. And he didn't have his top two receivers. He's thrown to David Njoku and he's thrown to Jerome Ford, running wheel routes down the field, going sideline to sideline. Like it's not that he's doing nothing. He's making these plays, he's making these passes that are just really, really good. It's not that he just has Amari Cooper that he's just targeting. He's making Njoku into the player that every Cleveland fan has wanted him to be for the past couple of years. He's a big tight end. He's got a lot of skill. He's using that. He's bringing the best out of these players. I mean, when Elijah Moore is on the field, he's a borderline number two. If Amari Cooper's there, Amari Cooper looks like, the Amari Cooper back in Dallas. And it's just like Deshaun Watson wasn't doing that. PJ Walker wasn't doing that. Dorian Thompson Robinson wasn't doing that. They're just you can see what this like the ceiling of this team, and I think Cleveland's pretty close to that ceiling right about now. And Joe Flacco, man, I just can't. You gotta love on it. You gotta love it.
The Fu Manchu needs to be brought back, and January Joe is ready to roll, baby.
He's having fun out there, man. He's just going out there. He's chucking some balls. It's a different atmosphere in Cleveland because I think it's one of the first time in NFL history, if not the first time, that you've had 4 starting quarterbacks during the season, and you're going to make the playoffs. And not just make the playoffs, you're technically getting a bye because you can rest your players this week. So it's going to be really big for the Browns, and they're starting their 5th quarterback this week. So it's just an even bigger record.
It's absolutely unbelievable. Well, we're gonna hit playoffs now. Tanner, I'm gonna let you lead us off with the NFC East.
The NFC. This is fun. This is really, really fun. Look, obviously I'm a little biased because I'm a Cowboys fan, but it's looking like Dallas has become the favorite to win the NFC East after the Philadelphia, I think, lost 4 of their last 5 to not a lot of great teams. Kyler Murray and the Cardinals, Drew Lock and Seattle Seahawks, Dallas of all the teams to take them down, and their defense. What's happened to Philly? Like where did this Philly defense go? Like this secondary, no offense, but it's not good. It's not good at all. It's one of the worst secondaries in the NFL right now. They're giving up a lot of passing touchdowns, and you're having guys like Drew Lock going out there and beating you. You're having guys like Kyler Murray going out there and beating you. But Kyler Murray's a good player, but he's on one of the worst teams in the NFL. He has no help. Like he's got James Conner, and James Conner is making this Philadelphia defense look like the Cardinals. Like it's just, I think this defense needs to improve drastically over these next couple of weeks if they want to have any shot in the playoffs, because the offenses in the NFC, just period, like the Niners alone, the Dallas, Detroit, like these guys are going to eat you alive. In the Rams, Seattle, they're fantastic offenses. Like it's just, they have so many playmakers. Philly, this was their division to win, or this was their division to lose. Let me say that. And right now they're losing it. And it looks like they're going to be the 5 seed if Dallas doesn't win against Washington this coming weekend. But fingers crossed. Dallas usually has good records against Washington and NFC East opponents. We'll see what happens. But what did you think of this? What did you think of this game this past week? I know there's a lot of controversy with Dallas and Detroit at the very end of the game, the 2-point conversion. What did you think about all that?
I mean, oh man. Well, first of all, I hit on the Philadelphia Eagles. You and I have been talking Philadelphia Eagles pretty much all season.
Yeah, we've been
And
hyping them up.
Yeah, and we have. And we also said week over week that this team did not look the same as they did last year.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't necessarily expect this big of a meltdown. Like this is like Chernobyl meltdown. Like
Yeah.
all they had to do was just win one more game. And like you said, their strength of schedule was, I think, the second easiest in the league.
Mm-hmm.
And they lost, right? The Arizona game, Kyler's coming back with fire.
Yeah, he's playing
With
well.
fire right now. Kyler's playing extremely well since he's come back from injury. But yes, James Conner made the Philadelphia Eagles defense look like a bunch of children. And I never saw that coming. You know what I mean? Because the Philadelphia Eagles of recent have been really, really good against the run.
Mm-hmm.
And Jalen just did not look good. Devontae Smith got hurt, and then he was still out there, but he didn't necessarily look as good. But it was a high scoring game. But this is one thing you can't have. This is literally like what happened with Dallas a couple seasons ago when they had the division locked up, and all they had to do was win one of the last 3 games, and they lost all 3 of those games and ended up not making the playoffs or being a wild card spot in the playoffs. Let me correct myself there.
Mhm.
So the Philadelphia Eagles, best way to describe it, complete meltdown.
Okay.
Complete meltdown. All Dallas has to do is beat Washington, and then they have so many potential opponents that they could play. And I'm going to read this tweet that I found. Oh, I don't even have the name of the tweet anymore. Maybe I'm not going to read that anymore because I don't want to take away that. But anyway,
I can go for it if you want me to think about it too. I mean, Dallas, if they're the number 2 seed, right? Let's say the Niners are the 1 seed, they're locked in. Dallas 2, Detroit would be 3. Granted, Dallas, yeah, Detroit would be 3, and then 4 would be whoever wins the NFC South. Let's just say it's going to be Tampa Bay, but I think it could also be the Falcons, which is kind of nuts. But anyways, the 4 plays the 5, so Philly's going to play Atlanta or Tampa, and they're probably going to win that game. I can't. If it's Tampa, I think they got a shot at winning it, but I don't know about Atlanta. That 5's going to win.
So I'll jump in right there. So the
Uh-huh.
Bucks and Saints are tied at 8-8 right now, and they play each other.
Oh,
If I'm not
okay.
mistaken. Oh no, the Bucks play the Panthers, the Saints play the Falcons.
What are the Falcons?
So the Falcons are 7-9. So the best the Falcons can get to would be 8-9. If they beat the Saints then go to 8-9, and then the Falcons have the same record as them. And I think they split in the division, if I'm not mistaken. We need to see who won
Mm-hmm.
the first time they played. But if the Bucks win, they jump up to 9. You see what I'm saying? So they'd be
Yeah.
the only team with
Okay.
9 wins. So and the Bucks play the Panthers, who have only won twice. So the Bucks have the easiest path in the NFC South, in my opinion.
Okay, so let's say it's going to be likely the Bucks, but potentially the Saints or the Falcons. So, um, Philly, let's say they win that game, because I think they would be a favorite going in, even though they're going to be on the road. They'll win. They'll be the 5 seed. Dallas will play number 7, who's probably going to be either Seattle or LA, who they've played both of them this year and they've won both of those games. But an important thing to note is Dallas will be at home, and they have one of the best home records in the NFL in the past couple seasons. So I think Dallas, whoever they play, could probably win, because, again, the Cowboys just play really well at home, and they're going to go up against an opponent that they have beaten this year. And so that's going to happen. The number 3 seed, Detroit, will probably play the 6. So, again, they're going to play Seattle or, I think, LA. And I think Minnesota or Green Bay can sneak in there too somehow, but I think Green Bay is actually the 7 right now, so Dallas might play Green Bay at home, which let's not talk about that. But the 3 will play the 6. Detroit will play, like I said, L.A. or Seattle, or whoever ends up being the 6. And I think they win that game. The thing is, I'm trying to say is I think 1, 2, and 3, and 5 will win, and that'll put Dallas against Detroit at home in the divisional round, and then the Niners against Philly at home in San Fran in that round. So, if Dallas were the 5 seed, this, you don't want to be it. You don't want to be the 5 seed. You don't want to play the Niners at home, because if you win, it's likely if you win in the wild card round, it's likely that you're gonna go play the number 1 seed, because 2 and 3 are probably going to win because they're playing, worse teams, worse seeded teams, right? So I think that's the most likely outcome. If anything else happens, like if Dallas loses, if Detroit loses in the wild card round, then things get really interesting. Whoever is the lowest remaining seed will play the Niners, and whoever the other 2 are will play each other, with the higher seed getting home field advantage, right? So I think Dallas is in a really good position. If they win their matchup against the 7 seed, which is potentially the easiest matchup in the wild card round because it is the 7 seed, they have, I'll say, the second best chance to make the NFC Championship game, because the Niners will have home field advantage. They're the number 1 seed, and if number 1 and number 2 meet, then number 1 gets the home field advantage. But Dallas won't meet San Fran until the NFC Championship game. It's just not possible until that point if they get the 2 seed. So Dallas has a really good spot right now. Philadelphia is not in a good spot.
Not at all. Not at all. And you nailed it. And I found the name. It's Corey Clark ISU on Twitter. Um, Opponent one, Rams, and this is talking about Dallas. The
It would have to
opponent
be
one
the
is the
7
Rams.
seed. Yeah.
Yes, and that is if the Rams lose to San Francisco, Seattle beats Arizona, and the Packers beat the Bears. Then that could potentially be an opponent. Opponent two, Seattle. Seattle beats Arizona, Packers lose to Bears. Opponent three, Packers. Packers beat Bears, Rams beat 49ers.
Ooh,
Potential opponent four, Saints. Saints beat Atlanta,
really?
Cardinals beat Seattle, and then the Bears beat the Packers.
Okay.
So there's a ton of potential opponents that can happen. Now, like you said, it's all based off of seeding. And we'll see exactly what happens this week, but it is in no way, locked into a spot. So what that
Mhm.
whole point of that segment was that week 18 is,
It's
I
huge.
mean, there's so many teams,
Yeah,
so many teams
I think you
that
have
could potentially make it.
number 1, 2, and 3 in the NFC are pretty locked up. I wouldn't say they are locked up, but they are pretty locked up. The Lions have won their division, and the only one that could change would be Dallas, right? The 5 is locked to Philly, and well, it's not locked. They could still win, but they're going to be 2 or 5. Dallas will be 2 or 5, and then 6 and 7 could be anyone. It could be anyone, and then 4 could be anyone in the NFC South, except the Panthers, I guess. But it's this is the best position Dallas has had in a couple years, because we don't like playing the Niners. Let's just put it that way.
They do not. Dallas does not do well against the Niners in the playoffs. Jumping to the NFC North, like you just talked about, the Lions are the winner. They locked it up. There's no way they can lose that division. But you have the Packers and the Vikings sitting there for possible wild card spots still, because
Mm-hmm.
the Packers are 8-8 and the Vikings are at 7-9. So, like you said, the NFC North is locked up, but the Packers and Vikings are
Could
both possible wild card teams right now.
could anyone in the NFC North jump up to the 6th seed? Is that possible? Because I know Detroit likes to struggle against their division. We saw them play the Packers, we saw them play the Bears, and they lost both those games in recent memory. So I don't know. I'm thinking if potentially one of those two teams could get up to the 6th seed, then Detroit would play them at home. Because right now,
I mean, if they get up to 9 wins, right, then you would be almost at that spot, right? The only other
mm-hmm,
team that would be 9 wins, well, that's a wild card, right? So yeah, I mean, Atlanta would be the only other NFC team. No,
LA would have to
this,
lose because LA's 9 and
yeah,
7. I pulled it up, and then the next closest one would have to be Green Bay. Green Bay would have to win, and
and
then
they're sitting there at 8-8.
yeah, and so they would be tied at that point. I don't know how the tiebreakers would work, but I don't know. It could happen. I think maybe.
Yeah, in the NFC North, like we said, locked up, but still huge wild card implications there. And then like we were talking about already, the NFC South,
Oh, and
the Bucks and the Saints.
who plays the Rams and Niners?
I
Right?
don't know. Look that one up.
I think they do. I think you said the
I,
Niners play
I
them.
want to say the Rams play the Niners. I think that's correct.
Yeah, they
Yes, it is
do.
correct. We
They
have
do.
it. We have it as a Sunday afternoon game.
And the Niners are sitting their starters.
Yes, and that's exactly when we pick these games later. We're gonna let you know who's gonna be sitting their starters.
Mhm.
The NFC South, you have the Bucks and the Saints sitting there tied at 8-8. Atlanta at 7-9. The whole division is up for grabs. And the Buccaneers play the Panthers, so easiest route, like we said, and then the Saints end the season on the Falcons. So NFC wildcard spots are up for grabs like crazy. Because Saints and Bucks are sitting there tied. If the Saints win, they could go to 9-8, and then if the Bucks win, they could go to 9-8, right?
Mhm.
And then you have Seattle, you have LA there too, sitting there with 9-8, and if LA wins against a backup San Francisco team, which they should, then they jump to 10, and then they're out of that spot, right? So you have so many teams that are sitting there that could potentially be there with 9 wins,
Right.
and it's a toss up in the NFC right now
Mhm.
in terms of the wildcard spots.
If LA wins, they guarantee the 6th seed. I'll say that. If they win, they'll guarantee that seed. And then it's just going to be an all-out brawl for the 7th seed.
Yep. And you already talked about we're jumping to the AFC now. You've already talked about Cleveland's division, right? The Ravens already locked it up. Cleveland are the only other team that can or not the only other team. I think actually Pittsburgh is still playoff eligible, if
They
I'm not
are.
mistaken. So go ahead and take us away with the AFC. What?
What for Cleveland? AFC North.
Thank you.
Yeah.
AFC North.
Well, I mean, funny enough, the AFC North is pretty locked up. The Ravens are the 1 seed. The 2 seed could be Miami or Buffalo, and both of them could also potentially make the playoffs. I don't know all the tiebreakers, all the situations for that, but they play each other this weekend.
I got the tiebreakers for Buffalo and Miami because I knew you're going to bring it up. This is
Oh.
from Sal Sports on Twitter. Buffalo wins at the Dolphins. They get the number two seed at home and cannot play Miami in round one. Bills lose at Dolphins. They need Jaguars or Steelers to lose to get into the playoffs. Then they would be 6 or 7 seed and play Miami or Kansas City in round one.
Ooh.
If Bills lose plus Jacksonville win plus Pittsburgh wins, Bills miss playoffs.
That's insane. I mean, who? Let's look. Let's look. Who does Jacksonville play? I think they play Indy. No, they play Tennessee this week, which they definitely should win. And then Pittsburgh plays, if I'm not mistaken, Baltimore. But Baltimore, again, another
That
team
is correct.
that's going to be sitting their starters. So definitely not easy games. And I don't know if Baltimore. I mean, I think Baltimore is going to be trying to win the game, but they're also going to have a ton of backups in. So, and Steelers have been one of the best teams recently. I'll say they have looked really good since firing their offensive coordinator. They're running the ball at an extraordinary rate. You know, they're running very well with Najee Harris. I think they're finally starting to use him correctly. He's starting to look like a little Jerome Bettis in him, just a little bus, baby bus, not a big bus, just
Ooh.
baby bus. But Steelers are not a bad football team right now. Mason Rudolph's playing really well. And he's distributing the ball extremely well to his very, very good Deontay Johnson and and George Pickens, excuse me. But Pittsburgh's a scary team, and funny enough, Jacksonville, Indianapolis, Houston, and Pittsburgh are all 9-7. All of them, all four of them.
Exactly. And like you said, that was the AFC East we talked about with Buffalo and Miami in that playoff
Mhm.
picture. Now we jump to the AFC South with, like you just said, the Jags, the Colts, and the Texans are 9-7. And guess what? The Texans play the Colts. And like you said, the Jags play the Titans.
Mhm.
So we'll see. We're picking that game. So I'm not going to necessarily say who I would take against the Texans and the Colts right now, but the Jags and the Titans,
Yeah.
that just feels like a game that Jacksonville's going to lose.
You think so?
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It feels like it.
I want to say if Jacksonville wins that game, I think they win the division regardless of the other outcome. I'm pretty sure
Mhm.
that that's the way that that'll go down. But if they don't, then the winner of Indy and Houston will win that division, which is insane. You think Houston could win that division after Jacksonville's basically been handed it this entire season? So
It's two teams in the NFL that had the division almost. I mean, not necessarily locked up. I think Philly kind of had a little bit more of a lead, but Jacksonville had a pretty good lead at one point in the division. And I know it was toward the beginning of the season, but still,
no, but
you
they
know,
were a
it's
very very good football team this year at one point. You know,
mhm. And ETN, he got me all the way to the fantasy championship, and I lost to Tanner again this season. But hey, that's the playoff.
back to back.
That's the playoff picks we got. We got a ton of stuff going on week 18. So what we're saying is, next week we're gonna hit our playoff bracket, and I
Oh,
am very excited
yeah, we do need to
to
do that.
to do the playoff bracket for next podcast. So we'll both pick our playoff brackets, and we'll see who we have winning the Super Bowl. We'll have one bracket that's not biased for Cowboys winning the Super Bowl, and we'll have another bracket, that is biased, right? But that is all the playoff talk. Now we're jumping to the matchup talk,
Oh,
and Tanner will go ahead and take us away. I had a rough week last week. I had a rough week, and you now are in sole first place going into playoffs, which is very scary.
very very scary. You know, Tanner likes to heat up in the playoffs. Chad, I know you know that pretty well from personal experience. Yeah, he's flipping me off a little bit. Just for you listeners out there, but the back to back champ. You know, we don't got to rub it in a little bit. But anyways, I went 5-2 this past week. Chad went 3-4. That brings my overall season to 55-35, and Chad's season to 53-37. So I don't think anything's over at this point, but you never know. I mean, I got 2-game lead, and we're gonna get right into these picks. There's no Thursday night game, so we're just gonna head right into the Saturday game.
Exactly. We have the Ravens versus the Steelers on Saturday. Tanner already said it. The Ravens have already come out and said that they're going to sit their starters. Who do you got, Tanner?
Before I want to pick this game, I want to talk to you about this because
Mhm.
I think it's interesting because I think Lamar's going to win the MVP for second time overall this season. I think he's had a really good season overall. I don't think it's the best MVP season ever, but he did have 5 touchdowns against Miami, who's pretty good defense, you know. But what happens in the playoffs? You know, do you really want Lamar Jackson sitting not 1 but 2 weeks? Um, based on his previous experiences in the playoffs, you've seen him drop a lot of games. You know, he's not had a lot of playoff success. He's very similar to, we like to talk about Dak in that category. You know, he balls out in the regular season, but it comes to playoffs and he choke. You know, it's a very similar story for Lamar Jackson, and he hasn't had, I'll say, the toughest playoff matchups too. So it. What do you think? Do you think they play him a little bit, like a quarter? They play him like a half? What do you
I
think?
think they have to play him, at least a drive,
Yeah.
bare minimum, one drive, so you have him going. It's not like he's not going to not practice, right?
Yeah,
So
of
he's
course.
he's he's still going to be there, but he's not going to be,
But it's those game reps
necessarily
that you want.
game speed. Exactly. He's not
Hmm.
necessarily going to have that. And yeah, you have seen what happens to Dallas. When Dallas was 14-2 that one season, and then they sat their starters, and then they sat that week because they got the number one seed, and then they came and played and just laid a goose egg, because that's what happened when they sit. Sometimes the Chiefs, the exact opposite side, right? Travis Kelsey and Patrick Mahomes, sat for not last season, but the season before when they won the Super Bowl.
Hmm.
And yeah, and Patrick Mahomes didn't miss a step. So it's
That's
it's one of those things.
yeah. Continue. I want to say after
I
you're
I
done.
was going to say it's one of those things for me. It's hard,
Hmm.
right? Because Lamar has looked like the best passer of his entire career this
Hmm.
season, in my opinion.
I'd agree.
And I think the reason that is because he's older
Hmm.
and he's getting more time on the field and more reps, which is essentially your point, right? I would play him a drive, and then there's nothing else you can do. Like
Yeah.
you cannot risk Lamar getting hurt, because
Hmm.
here's the thing. It's a division opponent. Pittsburgh is nasty on defense, and Lamar is not a typical pocket passer quarterback that just stands in there. He takes hits every game.
Hmm.
So I go a drive, and that's about it for me, because if he gets hurt because you keep him in for 2 quarters, and you're sitting there at the number one seed, I oh man, I would lose it.
Yeah, I think it would be a really stupid decision. But I also think, I mean, what year is Lamar in right now? You know, he's already out of his rookie contract. He's gotten big money. We've seen that. Would you not expect a veteran quarterback in this league to be able to sit out, this week and next week and come back at the same level? Like we've said with Patrick Mahomes, we've said with, all the other top quarterbacks in the league. Like, would you go look over there at San Francisco? I'm pretty sure they've already announced that they're not playing any starters during their game this weekend. So, you got a lot of veterans on that roster. The one who's not a veteran is Brock Purdy. Similar question. Do you trust him to go that long without, keeping up that level of skill? No, because he's young. But on the other side, do you trust Lamar Jackson to do that? I would say you should, because he's a veteran in the NFL. He's been here a long time, and I don't think he should be treated like he can't do it. You know what I mean? I think that
He's
he
he's about to win the MVP.
for the second time. Yeah, and
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. It's just, I think it's an interesting little the way we look at it, because it's like, why are we looking at this potential two-time MVP quarterback like he's a rookie? Like he needs to game reps to stay in the game, to not get rusty. Like you said, to your point, Patrick Mahomes, he sits out all the time for multiple buys that he has, and he goes on and he wins a Super Bowl. And in fact, he comes back and he looks better than he ever did. So I think it's really interesting. I think it's a topic of conversation that I wanted to bring up, and it's just like, why do we not have the same expectation for Lamar Jackson? I don't know. I just thought it was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have, and also with Lamar too, what he's done this season with the, yes, Odell Beckham, his, resurgence, his first round wide receiver out of Boston College as well has done pretty well, but like he really doesn't have that many weapons, right? And I'm
Hmm.
not, no disrespect to the Baltimore Ravens roster, but like when you look at San Francisco and Brock Purdy, like you said, is another example. It's like, yeah, he definitely needs more reps, but at the same time, it's like he doesn't really have to throw it a perfect pass to Kittle. He'll bring it in.
Hmm.
Doesn't really have to throw a perfect pass to Debo. He'll bring it in. Don't even have to throw it within 5 freaking yards of McCaffrey, and he'll somehow do a backflip catch and bring it in,
Hmm.
right? You know what I mean? So it's like, yes, I would want Purdy to almost play,
Yeah.
at least to drive at least a quarter. But my thing with Purdy is like you saw what happened when he got injured and how shit that team was in the playoffs, right? Like
Hmm.
they're, given their backup quarterback situation was not good. So he had to stay in and he couldn't throw the ball. And it was one of the most boring games ever against Philly because you knew it was going to happen every time. But that's what you don't want to happen. And if it happens 2 years in a row, San Francisco fans are going to be really angry, and all the other fans are going to be pretty happy, right?
Yeah.
Because, Brock Purdy and the San Francisco 49ers right now have the most playmakers, I would say, in terms of roster. So I don't think anybody wants to play the 49ers, let alone in the NFC and any AFC opponent in the Super Bowl, because right now they're the favorites. The Ravens and the Steelers, though, who do you got in that one?
I'm gonna go Steelers. I think we've seen before. It's just the backups don't really do a lot when Lamar's out. That's kind of like that's been the crutch of the Ravens for the past couple years. Back to right after they had that MVP season with Lamar. Their backups really don't get the job done when Lamar's not in. It's not the Ravens. It's just really not. He makes that football team. That football team is literally designed around him. Harbaugh has a job because of Lamar Jackson. So give me the Steelers. I think, like you said, division opponent and Steelers. They're hungry. They have a chance to make the playoffs, and I think they're going to. I think you're going to see three AFC North teams in the playoffs this year. The Bengals just barely missed it, but I think Steelers are gonna. Steelers are gonna win this game, playing really well, and Baltimore without their starters kind of suck. Kind of suck.
I'm going to be quick and short. I'm going Steelers as well. That one's whenever you got backup teams,
Yeah.
or sorry, backups playing on your team, and like you already said you're going to sit a lot of your starters. Yeah, give me Pittsburgh, and when Pittsburgh's hungry,
Hmm.
it's hard to not pick them.
Did you see though? Did you see the Pro Bowl rosters at all? I know this is like kind of late in the episode. We're even talking about this.
I did, yeah.
Did you see
What?
that the Ravens had both Patrick Queen and Roquan Smith make it for their linebacker? Those are the two starting linebackers in the AFC side, and it's both Ravens. They're both Ravens, and I mean they deserve it. I think they also had like Justin Matabike and Kyle Hamilton, which
Gigs.
is pretty sick. Yeah, I love Matabike doing that, but I thought it was funny. I thought. I mean, hey, Roquan, Patrick Queen. Remember.
I mean,
This is a side conversation. Remember when we were like, why the heck did they pick Patrick Queen when they got him in the first round? We were like, oh my gosh, we that should have been way later. But no, he's a Pro Bowl. He's a Pro Bowler.
no, my thing with Patrick Queen is I definitely had him as a first round linebacker, but I didn't think he was going to go that high. You know what I mean? Like I
Oh
didn't think
yeah,
that
yeah.
I didn't think they were going to take him that high. But my thing with Patrick Queen is that he was one of the fastest linebackers in coverage linebackers when he came out of LSU. He was sideline to sideline. I remember from
Hmm.
when I had him reading it in my scouting report of him, and sometimes offense or defenses can change when you have linebackers like that, right? You have those two linebackers in the middle of the field patrolling your field. Good luck, right? You get one more linebacker that's decent in coverage, and you now have two of the best linebackers. I mean, the best linebacker in football, in my opinion, is Fred Warner, and then right
Hmm.
behind him, you have Roquan Smith.
Yeah.
And I mean, for me with Roquan Smith, it's like seeing him at Georgia, like he just was always making tackles, and you kind of wonder what's going to happen in the NFL when guys translate like that. But whenever I'm watching college players, specifically linebackers, the biggest stat I'm looking for is to make sure that they have over 100 tackles in the season. Another player that I can think of off the top of my head is Logan Wilson out of Wyoming, the starting linebacker for Cincinnati, who I was extremely high on. He had over 100 tackles every single season. And Roquan Smith and or Patrick Queen as well were very close to those numbers too coming out of college. So yeah, definitely those guys, you couldn't believe it whenever they took them, especially when you already have, or not already had, because at that point, if I'm not mistaken, I think Roquan Smith um,
Yeah.
was traded
He was in
from
Chicago.
Chicago.
Hmm.
Yeah, from Chicago. I understand Chicago doesn't want to pay him. Chicago doesn't like to pay anybody in terms of the Bears. Their baseball team doesn't pay quite literally anybody. That was a stat from my buddy Mitch down here in California. But I mean, the biggest thing that I'll say is it's hard for me with linebackers, because if you're a sideline to sideline linebacker and you just so happen to be a Dallas Cowboy fan and or watched Bill Parcells at all in the early 2000s, like that was the philosophy in Dallas, is you couldn't have enough linebackers, right? You had Dat Win, and then you had another linebacker being drafted in the second and third round. Now, I don't necessarily think you should draft a linebacker in the first round every single year, but I do feel like a linebacker is the same as a quarterback. I think you should take a quarterback every single year in the draft, not early. Not early. Quarterback, you're taking sixth, seventh round, fifth, sixth, seventh round, maybe. Linebacker, I would almost say you're going 3-4, because the round 3-4 linebackers, you can still get those guys that are 100 tackles a season, Logan Wilson, right? So I don't know. For me, if I'm an NFL team, I'm personally running a 3-4, and I'm having, or any kind of team, doesn't have to be NFL, some D3 college, you know what I mean? I'm running a 3-4 scheme, and I'm having two middle linebackers that are zone coverage linebackers that can stretch that field. Because when you have a 3-4 defense, yes, it's going to be a lot harder to get to the quarterback, so the quarterback could potentially have a little bit more time. But you have off-ball linebackers coming off on the other side, right? And then you have the middle linebackers that are sitting there. So my biggest thing is, like, how many times have you watched the Dallas Cowboys in recent years? And Leighton Vander Esch is sitting there, or any linebacker in Dallas is sitting there in the middle linebacker position, and they get past him
Yes,
a
I mean,
lot,
it's
right?
very often. It doesn't matter if it's
Yeah,
running or passing.
exactly. So it happens. Now you got another guy right there. It changes everything.
Mm-hmm.
So those dink and dunk under 5-yard passes where the linebackers are, those don't happen in Baltimore. They don't happen, because you have Patrick Queen and you have Roquan Smith sitting there. And also, Roquan Smith is the best tackling linebacker in the NFL. Not best, but top 5. Can't put anybody about Fred Warner. And then you have Patrick Queen coming out there that's like, oh wait, he's like way younger and faster. Wait,
Yeah.
what? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And you have two SEC schools sitting there just going at it too, right there. So me personally, I think you run a 3-4 and you bring in those zone coverage linebackers and just run shop, dude.
Yeah.
um, it's hard not to, right? And also, those Ravens all black jerseys,
I
and
know,
then
it's
those
so
two
sick.
running around in the middle of the field. God, dude, those
I
are so
know.
cool.
I know.
Jumping
It's
to
not fair.
It's not fair. Jumping to the next game, I think I already said it, but I also have the Steelers. Jumping to the next game, Saturday night. That was a Saturday afternoon game. We got the Texans and the Colts. Tanner already kind of gave away his pick with the Texans, because, I mean, how do you not, right? It's the Texans versus the Colts. It's Gardner Minshew versus C.J. Stroud for a potential playoff spot. C.J. Stroud's pissed, right? C.J. Stroud's unhappy right now. If he would have gone out those couple games with a concussion,
They
you never know where the Texans would be sitting right now. And
they
also,
very well could have won in a lot of those games.
exactly. And also, Ohio State didn't make the college football playoff this year. So CJ Stroud needs a little redemption for the OHIO. So we got to go Texans here, right? We got to go Texans here. I got the Texans beating the Colts. You watch the NFL ESPN with Max Crosby last week calling Gardner Minshew a little ass man or something like that. He's obviously shook. Not really. That guy's Gardner Minshew's awesome. But I got the Texans, unless the Colts can give the ball to Jonathan Taylor every play and run, 5-10 yards of play. I don't think the Colts are going to get that game done, but it's a division opponent. Anything is possible against a division opponent. So I got the Texans, and I don't think the Texans are going to win with or by as much as a lot of people do. I think it's going to be a close game.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, Houston played Indianapolis earlier in the year, and Indy won. This is not going to be like a sweep for Houston at all. It wasn't. I think they won by 2 possessions last time, and Indy looked good against Houston. Granted, it was earlier in the season. It's very early, but CJ's matured a lot since then. He's had some ups, he's had some downs, but I think he's their franchise quarterback of the future. I think that Indianapolis Colts defense is weak in a lot of places, and I think it's just really going to come down to who has the ball more. And in my opinion, that's going to be Houston. And just the ability of CJ Stroud to make those plays, to keep his team on, going on drives, to extend drives, stuff like that. I think that's going to be the ultimate decider. And I agree with you. I think it's going to be, a close game. I don't think it's going to be a blowout because Indy has been playing well in the past couple of weeks. So, but I'm going to go with Houston. I think that they are a really, really good football team. I think Nico Collins has stepped up very well in place of Tank Dell. It's not one for one in place of Tank Dell, but I think he's kind of become that number one that you're starting to see in Houston. And CJ's absolutely favoring him and, kind of throwing him the rock like he did with Tank Dell. So Houston, they're making the playoffs, maybe, depending on what Jacksonville does.
H-Town, hold it down. Sunday morning, we got the Falcons and the Saints. I think this one's a toss-up. I really do. I really do. If Arthur Smith, I was about to say something there, but I didn't. I didn't.
You're about to sound like me, bro.
Yeah. If Arthur Smith, I'll say this in a nicer way, actually gives the ball to Bijan Robinson and features Bijan Robinson, I think they can win that game. I think they have a better chance to win mini games that they did this season if they would have given the freaking ball to Bijan Robinson. Okay. Here's there's that off the table now. Second thing that I got to get off the table. Got to get it off my chest. Drake London.
Yeah.
Kind of right? Everybody at the beginning of the season's like, meh, I don't know. This year, no. He's number one. Desmond Ritter just
he doesn't throw to him.
Balls over there.
Yeah.
Balls over there. You know what I mean? It's just not close. Desmond Ritter, sorry, not the guy in Atlanta. Not the guy in Atlanta. Drake London and Bijan are. Those are the guys that you build off of and feature them. I'm not even going to even bring up Kyle Pitts because that is the saddest excuse that I've ever seen for Atlanta to draft a tight end that high and just not use him at all. You know what I mean? Dallas is not using Tony Pollard the way that they should, but Atlanta is not using everybody the way that they should. And there's one reason for that. It's Arthur Smith. I don't care if they make the playoffs. He needs to be fired. He's brutal. Anyway, done off my Arthur Smith rant. I'm sorry. He's not doing
not
it
a fan.
Me, right?
Not a fan.
They could have easily won that division if they had a decent coach. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Easily, in my opinion, easily. Done with my rant. I'm still going to go Saints. After all that, I'm still going to pick Saints.
He's going Saints. I think the Saints have been probably one of the most inconsistent teams, I think, this year out of just all the teams in the NFL. Like I was trashing on Derek Carr earlier. He's not a bad quarterback at all. He's been in this league a long time, and I think he deserves to be in this league for a long time. And they have a really, really good football team. Let me just say that. I think that you got the emergence of that young kid, Shaheed, or whatever his name is. Chris Olave is just doing his thing. He's continuing to be a baller. Kamara's playing really well. I just think if Derek Carr can hold it down, this Atlanta defense is going to let him through. I'll say Atlanta has had a much better defense in this season recently than they have previously. With the pickup of Jesse Bates over from Cincinnati, he's had a really good year. Made the Pro Bowl too, by the way, which is pretty cool. And I think Derek Carr is probably gonna have to not do a lot in this game if they want to win it, because I think that Atlanta passing defense is actually pretty good. And Derek Carr has been known to be kind of that inconsistent quarterback recently, and I think that's just where it all starts with the Saints. Their defense is good. I'm going to go Saints. I think that they're going to win the game. I think that it's just one of those divisional things. It's giving me Drew Brees kind of Matt Ryan vibes a little bit, at the end of the season. It's like, oh man, this is going to be fun. I think it's going to be really close. I think they're going to play well. I don't think the Falcons are going to play as bad as you think they are. I think it's just going to be another close game because, again, divisional matchup. And I'm going Saints. Because you got to give it to them finally. They've had a lot of ups and downs recently. I'm still not over that NFC playoff game that they just absolutely blew that freaking pass interference. You know what I'm talking about, that pass interference call against the Rams.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Speaking of the Rams, jumping to the next game we're picking on Sunday afternoon, the Rams versus 49ers. Tanner already mentioned that the 49ers have maybe or not maybe come out and said that they're already sitting all of their starters. Of course, you would never release your game plan before you start playing. You would do that. Who you got?
I am. I I'm going Rams. It's pretty easy for me. It's going to be the Rams. I think they're really good. Like even though they're not locked into their division, like they're even though they're not locked in to anything technically, I think they actually have locked into the playoffs, but not a potential seed. They're a really good football team. Puka Nakua made the Pro Bowl. I think he had like 1,400 yards as a rookie, and you have Cooper Cup on the other side, and not to mention
He's
Kyron Williams is looking like Todd Gurley 2.0.
literally, and Puka, real quick to hit on that point, he's like
Mhm.
24, 26 yards away from breaking the rookie receiving record of all time. So
It's disgusting. I mean, that kid is so good, and to have a receiver like Cooper Cup on the other side teaching you everything that you need to do, like let's not forget that Cooper Cup wasn't playing to begin this season. It was just Puka. It was just Puka, and that's all Stafford did. I think
in 2 years removed from like the one of the best seasons that a wide receiver's ever had with Cooper
yes,
Cup too.
yes, and this is I think one of the better rosters in the NFL. I think it's really young. Besides Matthew Stafford, who I will say is playing at a very, very high level right now. You've had some inconsistencies with his injuries throughout the season, but he's there right now. He's playing well, and he's getting the balls to his all-star, his Pro Bowl receivers. He's dinking and dunking to Kyron Williams. I think he knows exactly
Kyron
what
looks
he
great.
has. He knows exactly what he has, and guess what? They're all young. They're all full of energy. They're all ready to go. All Matthew Stafford has to do, and he's been doing his whole career, is get him the ball. And we know he can do that at a very, very high rate. And their defense, while it's not the best it's ever been, Aaron Donald's there. Can't count him out. He's going to make a play, and especially when the playoffs are on the line. So give me the Rams, man. I think they're a really good football team, and I think they're going to surprise a lot of people this postseason.
I agree. I got the Rams too. You said every point that I was going to bring up. So jumping to the next game, we're going to the Cowboys and we're going to Washington. This one's going to be fast too. Dallas is not sitting their starters. They will have to play this game and they will have to win this game if they want to somehow get the NFC East. The NFC East was quite literally stolen last week, like we were talking about earlier in the episode. Not a whole lot of Cowboy fans thought it was going to be possible after they dropped the game, or I mean, even after they beat the game with Philadelphia toward the end of the season,
Mm-hmm.
most recent weeks. But not a lot of people thought that was going to be possible because Philly was in control of the NFC East, and now they're not. Like Tanner said earlier, the Cowboys are the current leaders of the NFC East, and all they got to do to lock it up and the number 2 seed is beat Washington. And I don't think that they're going to drop a game to Washington. Yes, they've dropped last 2 out of 3 games, but they've played really good opponents the last 2 out of 3 games. I just realized now with the Cowboys that we're talking about them. You asked me earlier about the Lions, and I never got to that point. So if you're still listening and wanting to hear about that point with the Cowboys, it's hard, right? I
Yeah.
was talking to a lot of people, multiple friends of mine who have played football, multiple, friends of mine who haven't played football, and multiple people that just like to hate on the Cowboys, right? So a lot of people I've been talking to because I wanted to get an opinion before we kind of went on the podcast. And to hit on that, what Tanner's talking about is there's a very controversial call with the Detroit Lions. They literally had a touchdown, but then they called it back essentially because the tackle did not report as eligible. You see the angle of it. You see Jared Goff telling him to go tell that he's eligible.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I was told from friends that have played football that that's not the formation that they have would have gotten called if they wouldn't have called them for that. They would have been called for an illegal formation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's an interesting point because, I'm not, this is one sport I haven't played, but it's the one sport I know most about in terms of football or all the sports I know, maybe hockey, but, because I played that for God, like 20 years.
Sure.
But with football there, like with that decision there, it's like, okay, that's one point, right, that you can bring up. The other point that you can bring up is that it was just a weird play from the beginning, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
all of the offensive linemen were not where they were supposed to be. I mean, if you even looked at the snap, it didn't look right. Like everything about that play looked wrong, and it looked like an illegal formation, in my opinion. So that's the tough part. The other thing is that when you hear the audio and you hear him like literally like reporting,
Mm-hmm.
that's pretty hard to argue. You know what I mean? Because like you can literally hear the audio of it. But once again, from my opinion, there was about 3 or 4 different fouls you could have called on that play on Detroit. So if it wouldn't have been that, it would have been the illegal formation. And then if you really looked at it closely, it was technically a false start as well if you looked, because
Yeah.
the tackle kind of got off a little bit faster. Oh, and by the way, what a lot of people aren't talking about is they still went for it even though they got the penalty. Lions could have kicked the extra point and literally, or they could have kicked it right there and tied the game and gone into overtime.
Hmm.
Right. So it's not like the Cowboys or the Lions had to do that. They didn't. So it being a Cowboys fan, obviously I'm going to be a bit biased here, but I don't necessarily think it was as big of a deal as everybody's making it. I think that if it wasn't the Dallas Cowboys, it would not nearly be, what it is right now. But um, Dez caught it, and Dallas lost a playoff game with the Packers. So shut up. And that's all I got to say, right?
No,
The
yeah.
Lions already locked up their spot. They can't lose their division, and I get it. I got friends coming at me on Instagram for it, right? I got it sent to me about 50,000 times from different people that I haven't talked to in forever. But come on, you know what I mean? Come on,
Yeah.
everybody steals a game every now and then, and hey, maybe that's the one we stole. At least we didn't get caught deflating balls.
I mean, hey, yeah, that's true. They still won the Super Bowl, by the way. But um,
Tom,
Tom, I think I think what a lot of people are not talking about too, is that exactly what you said. They go for it on that 2 point conversion and they don't get it, or they get it
thank you.
and they call the penalty or whatever. Regardless of the ineligible man downfield or whatever the penalty was, Dallas still had to defend a 2 point conversion not once, but two more times after that happened. Because they had that first penalty that brought them back like 5 yards. They went for it again. They had the other penalty that brought them back up, and then they had to defend it again. And then not only did they successfully defend it twice, or once, they defended it twice in a row. And not to mention, Dallas shouldn't have even been in that position. The Lions shouldn't have even gotten the ball back. Because do we not remember they're going into it, they're talking about it. It's that tripping call. I think it's Peyton Hendershot. He gets tripped, and it should have been a penalty on the drive before. And if they give him that penalty, if they give Dallas that penalty, game's over. Dallas, they kneel the ball 3 times, game's over. It doesn't matter anymore because it's a penalty that gives you first down yardage, and it was on a very deciding drive of the game. So I think a lot of people are making a lot of bigger deal out of it than it actually is because, oh no, the Cowboys won and they're going to win their division. It's just one of those things. It's like, I think a lot of other things could have happened in that game that would have changed the outcome of it. But at the end of the day, you have 60 minutes to go out there and win a football game. And if you can't do that, I think it's not the fault of one play. I think it's kind of a stupid argument to say that this is the reason they lost. Yes, they did lose, and that play was a factor in it, but they had multiple other chances to win the game. It's not that one play that you're doing. Like you're not going to walk out on the field, play one play, and leave. That's not the whole game. There's however many other plays that you're playing. You could have had multiple other chances to win. So I think it's just a stupid argument. I think that Dallas not having like a Mickey game, or Dallas having a free road to their division. No, I don't think so. I think they've earned it. I think Philadelphia, like we said earlier, they've had a collapse, and Dallas beat the Lions. They beat the Lions at home. It was a close game. We've seen it a lot in the NFL and a lot of controversial calls. But
Well, and also to hit on your point with the division, right? Like Dallas played that game on Saturday,
mm-hmm,
right? Philly didn't play the Cardinals till the next day on Sunday.
mm-hmm.
So if the conspiracy theorists are coming out of the woodwork saying Dallas, if Dallas wins that game, they win a division. That wasn't necessarily not necessarily true. That's just completely false.
Mm-hmm.
Because yes, if Dallas lost the game, of course they wouldn't have won the division. Because but then the Eagles dropped. Right. So then we're in the same conversation. Then it becomes down to a win this week. Right. But here's my thing with that. It's like nobody knew who the division leader was at that point still. Dallas wasn't the division leader. Philly was still the division leader, and then Philly lost
Mm-hmm.
against the Cardinals, right? So it's like I get it. You know what I mean? Like the argument of like the conspiracy theory argument where it's like the Cowboys, like the NFL rigged it so the Cowboys could win that division.
I just,
Okay.
I
If
just, yeah, why?
it if you have your tinfoil hat on, your conspiracy theorist hat on, right? Shouldn't Dallas win the NFC East every year then? No. Okay. Right. Yeah. There's been a different winner like every other year. Okay. With Dallas and Philly. So it's like that argument right there is just invalid because then you don't give it to Philly. Right. So I don't know. That's my biggest thing with that one. Yes, of course, if you're a Lions fan and if you maybe saw that play differently than this side of the argument, right? Then yeah, of course we can have differing opinions, but I don't know, man. I think it's a little bit bigger of a deal than everybody's making it. But hey,
I think
everybody hates Cowboys.
everybody, I mean, everyone will hate the Cowboys. I think it's just one of those things where it's like, Cowboys have been one of the most penalized teams in the NFL the entire season. So it's like
Boom.
it's one of those things where it's if get a win like this, in prime time where everyone sees it because based off of a holding or an ineligible man downfield penalty or whatever it was, I really don't think it's that big of a deal because Dallas has been screwed on multiple other occasions throughout the season. They've gotten
This
calls
season.
in seasons past. Let's
Yeah.
not forget about those
Yeah.
ones as well.
Yeah.
Under this regime, Dallas is not good with penalties. They get penalized a lot, and they're kill their drives. They are a part of the game, and you just have to learn to live with them. It's just one of those things. You look at baseball, you see what the ump's doing. Like, however he's calling the game, that's how the game's going to be played. No one's going to complain about it. That's just how it's going to be played. You're not going to see people come on the Sports Center the next day and be like, oh, that should have been a ball. That was not a strike. And it's just like that's just how they're calling the game, man. That's just how they're seeing it. Um, it's just one of those things. Dallas won a game off of a penalty, and the Lions had multiple other shots to win it as well. So yeah, whatever. Right?
What's
Dallas is
really
gonna win.
funny is
Dallas is
that
gonna win this weekend. That's what it boils down to.
what's really funny too is that those refs like automatically are not in the playoffs now, which I
Mm-hmm.
thought was kind of funny. It's like that is the one thing I do like though. Like if it's gonna stir up that big of a shitstorm online, like the NFL's like, we're gonna get ahead of this right now. We're not doing this again.
Mm-hmm.
Like these guys are not. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But at the same time, like that game was kind of sloppy all around with the refing. There was multiple calls in that game where it was like, what?
Oh,
You know what I
dude.
mean? So I think
Yeah.
that's probably the main reason that they didn't move on to the NFL playoffs. But last game we'll talk about this episode, last game to pick, in arguably the most important game of the entire week.
This is Sunday night.
The Bills versus the Dolphins.
Nice.
Sunday night game. That's going to be one heck of a game. The Dolphins, I mean, the Dolphins beat the Cowboys, the Bills beat the Cowboys, but the Bills are, like we said in episodes past, they are the playoff Bills right now, and Josh Allen is not necessarily playing the best, but he's winning games and they are running the ball with James Cook. Stephon Diggs is,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what happened. He's a lot more run blocking, I guess, with this kind of new scheme going on, but you can't say anything because Buffalo hasn't lost in a while. So who do you got in this Miami and Buffalo game? Do you think the Dolphins are going to, even though they're leading them in the division right now, technically, do you think that they can pull it out? Because this is the game for Miami right here. This is the game right here for them to say, this is the type of team we are.
Mm-hmm.
This is the Miami Dolphins that we want to be this year. If Miami wins this game, that's huge. That's huge. They lock up the division. They lock up a better seed. Everything. And they could potentially kick Buffalo, which nobody in the AFC wants to play right now, out of the playoffs with what we said earlier with the losses that needed to happen. But what do you think happens in this one?
I think Buffalo wins it, man. I really do. I think we've seen it the past couple of years. Buffalo, they like to take it down to the wire, especially during the regular season. They're just like, the beginning of the season, it's not our thing. We'll do better at the end. We'll show up when it matters, and they have. They really, really have. I think they've taken down a lot of tough teams in this time. They made Dallas look like little girls. No offense, Dallas, but it was a bad game. It's just like
Bad game.
it's very bad game. And Josh Allen's just in that mode right now where he's just running around the field. He's finding open receivers. He's just making plays with his legs. He's doing he is the Bills. It's like we talked about with Lamar being the Ravens. Josh Allen is the Bills right now. And when playoff time comes, that's what you want. You want Josh Allen to be that guy who's gonna continue to make those plays. He's gonna hold the ball in his hands and he's gonna extend drives. And like you said with James Cook, I think he's like top 3 in rushing yards this season, which is pretty impressive actually. James Cook's really good. This is the first time I think I've seen the Buffalo Bills actually run the ball with Josh Allen playing, and they're a different
And
football
it's
team
not
because
Josh
of it.
Allen.
It's not Josh Allen. It is sometimes Josh Allen, but right now it's not always Josh Allen. James Cook is really good, and funny enough, his brother just got signed to the Ravens, so we're gonna be seeing him in the playoffs too. But James Cook's really good. He's getting involved, and it seems like we're not even missing Stephon Diggs. It seems like he's hasn't made an impact for the last half of the season, and James Cook has kind of just stepped up in his place, and that's a playoff football team. That's 100% a playoff football team. Um, you need guys to step up when it matters. Gabe Davis does a really good job of that during the playoffs, and now they got another guy with James Cook. So give me the Bills. I think they're there. I think they're hungry, and the Dolphins, I don't really know. They've had an up and down season. They just haven't looked like that complete team all year. And I know too, I don't know how much of an issue it's going to be or how much of a deal it is. I know Tyreek, he has had issues, or he's like, his house like got burned down or something like that. It caught on fire because of like something little that was just left on or something like that. So and potentially the biggest week of the season, that's a big thing to deal with. That's a very big thing. It's your house. Like, where are you gonna go? You're gonna go play with or sleep with someone else. To go with like your family, go into a hotel. Like, it's a lot of stuff to deal with, a lot of stress to deal with during already an extremely stressful week. So, not only are the Dolphins' best playmaker having a lot of issues right now with off the field stuff, but the Bills are playing really well. So give me the Bills, man. Give me the Bills. Give me McDermott and all them boys. I think it's gonna be close. I think Tua's gonna play well, but it's just hard for me to pick the Dolphins right now. It's hard to pick against the Bills when they're playing as well as they are.
It's playoff Josh Allen, and all he has to do is win to make the playoffs. He's won these previous weeks against, you can argue, harder teams.
Mm-hmm.
So hey, I think it's pretty simple for me. I'm going to take Josh Allen and the Bills, but if Miami makes me eat my words, I can tell you right now, I'm not going to be too angry, because then Miami shows up and really is that team and is that division leader. So we'll
Mm-hmm.
see what happens. But any other notes, Tanner? Or are we going to send this thing to next week?
No, Spurs still suck. Wembenyama's pretty good, but the Spurs still suck.
Well, the Sharks, they've gotten a little bit better. PSG got a very favorable draw in the Champions League, so that's really, really nice. We'll just, we'll
United's
end it
out
there.
of the Champions League. They have been for a little bit. That's fun.
Boys.
The
You
boys,
boys.
my
You
boys.
boys have Manchester United have. That's that one's tough. But we'll see what happens when PSG plays. You're gonna hear that from me. But thanks everyone again for listening, and we'll catch y'all next week.
Oh, bye-bye. All right, we're back, folks. It's not quite the end
We
of the
may
episode yet.
we may have forgot to pick the college football national championship that's coming on Monday, but don't worry, we got right back in because Tanner's the best sound engineer on the freaking planet, guys. We got a national championship game being picked. Tanner, Washington, Michigan. We have different picks. Who do you got?
I'm gonna go Washington. I think that they were a better team. I think they looked really, really good. I think it's gonna be hard to pick against Michael Penix, bro. I think that he's gonna become the Pac-12 and their whatever's happening with that conference. Give me Washington. It doesn't matter. He's gonna be one of those quarterbacks that I think we're gonna see on Sunday for a long, long time, and I think he's gonna win a natty, and I think that's how he's gonna go out.
Give me I'm on this, we were talking about conspiracy theories practically throughout the episode. In the end, when I went on a rant there, a bit of a tangent. I'm putting my conspiracy theory hat on. Baltimore Ravens are going to win the Super Bowl this year,
Don't do
and
that.
Michigan Wolverines are going to win
The
the national
Harbaughs,
championship.
the Harbaugh.
Harbaughs are just going to win it,
It's the
and
year
just
of the
right off in the
Harbaugh.
sunset, just right off in the sunset. Fists in the air with their trophies on horses, just running away somehow. Something majestic. I'm going to go Michigan, because JJ McCarthy's playing absolutely out of his mind.
True.
And I don't know if Washington's defense can stop him. The other thing is that I don't know if Michael Penix Jr., and I would love to be wrong here, because then he may jump up to number 2 over Jaden Daniels in my quarterback rankings in terms of draft. Probably not. But dude, I think Michigan's got the edge. I think they got the edge coaching. I think they have the edge offensively, and I think they have the edge defensively. Now, they do not have the edge in specific positions in offense. Washington has better wide receivers, no disrespect. And if they lean on Odunze, it could be over. But if Michigan leans on Corum and has JJ McCarthy throws when he needs to, and or vice versa, if JJ's hot like he did the last game, how he started the Rose Bowl game, then they'll lean on JJ a little bit more. But I'm going to go Michigan. I think the Wolverines are going to take down Washington. I may have a Husky as a dog, and I may be favoring Washington. But hey, I'm going to go against the team that you didn't pick. So let's go Wolverines in that one.
Let's go
And
UW.
that's the
UW, baby.
That's the end of the episode.
That is it. Goodbye for real this time.